The 1971 Tour de France was the 58th Tour de France, taking place the 26th of June to the 18th of July 1971. It consisted of 22 stages over 3,599.2 kilometers, ridden at an average speed of 38.084 kilometers per hour. The race was won by Eddy Merckx, his third consecutive victory. It was no easy win. After the 11th stage, Merckx was more than 8 minutes behind Luis Ocaña in the general classification. In the 14th stage, Ocaña crashed in the descent of the Col de Mente and had to leave the race. What is named the most famous fall in Tour de France history? Differences from the 1970 Tour de France. 1971 saw the introduction of bonification seconds for sprints in the intermediate sprints classification, which was won by Belgian Peter Nassen. The 1970 Tour had 5 split stages, and cyclists had complained about it. Nevertheless, the 1971 Tour again used split stages. One reason was that the UCI rules did not allow long stages to prevent the use of doping. Another reason was that split stages generated more income. The 1971 Tour had 2 rest days, and during the first rest day, the cyclists were transferred by airplane. The first time this happened during the Tour. Teams. The Tour started with the following 13 teams, each with 10 cyclists. Eddy Merckx, who had won the 1969 and 1970 Tours, was the big favorite. Pre-race predictions were certain that if he would not become ill a crash, Merckx would be the winner, and were speculating whether he would be able to lead the race from start to end. With fewer flat stages, fewer time trials and more mountain stages, it was thought that climbers would have an advantage. Route and stages. The 1971 Tour de France started on the 26th of June, and had 2 rest days in La Touca and Orsières. Race overview. The race started with a team time trial as prologue, won by Merckx team, which gave them a 20 seconds bonification for the general classification. After the first part of the first stage, Merckx teammate Wattmans briefly took over the leading position in the general classification, only to lose it to Merckx in the second part. In the second stage, Zoët Melck attacked early in the stage. Some cyclists, including Merckx, followed him, and soon a group of 15 cyclists was away. At the end, the margin to the rest of the field was almost 10 minutes. Merckx beat Roger de Vlamingh in the sprint, and everybody not in the first group was no longer a threat for Merckx. In the 7th stage, the leader in the points classification, Roger de Vlamingh, crashed and had to leave the race. Merckx was expecting a dangerous sprint, so he chose not to participate. While Merckx took part in intermediate sprints and final sprints, Ocaña had been saving his energy on the advice of Jacques Anquetil, and waited for the mountains to come. The 8th stage saw the first attack by Ocaña. Merckx was not able to chase him, and Ocaña got away. Zoët Melck and Agostinho also got away from Merckx, and gained some time on him. After that stage, Merckx was still leading, but only 36 seconds before Zoët Melck and 37 seconds before Ocaña. In the end of the 10th stage, Merckx lost contact after a flat tire, and lost time on Zoët Melck and Ocaña. Zoët Melck took over the lead, 1 second ahead of Ocaña. In the 11th stage, Ocaña attacked. At first, Zoët Melck, Van Impe and Agostinho were able to stay with him, but Ocaña left them and soloed to the victory, more than 6 minutes ahead of Van Impe. Merckx and Zoët Melck finished in 3rd and 4th place, almost 9 minutes behind. Ocaña had set such a pace that 61 cyclists finished outside the original time limit, leaving only 39 in the race. The time limit was consequently extended such that 58 more were allowed to start the next day. Ocaña seemed so strong that Merckx abandoned the idea to win his third tour. In the 12th stage, Merckx organized an attack and won back 2 minutes. This could have been more, had it not been for a mistake of an assistant team leader of Merckx's team. When Brie had a flat tire in the chasing peloton, the assistant team leader called from the remaining members of Merckx's team to help Brie to get back to the peloton. Rival teams in the peloton were now without Multony cyclists and could organize the chase. The group with Brie was unable to get back into the peloton because of the high pace of Merckx in the first group. The group with Brie almost did not make the time cut, in which case they would have been eliminated. The average velocity of the winner was a new record, and the cyclists arrived 1 hour ahead of the earliest time schedule, and the preparations at the finish line had not been completed yet. The mayor of Marseille, where the stage ended, was so upset that he refused to let the race visit Marseille again. In the 13th stage, a time trial, Merckx was the strongest and won back more seconds. In the 14th stage, there was heavy rain. On the way up to the Col de Ment, Merckx attacked several times, but each time Ocaña was coming back. During the descent, Ocaña fell. Melck punctured and was unable to avoid him, and hit him at high speed. Ocaña was hit, injured his shoulder and had to give up. Merckx became the new leader, but out of respect for Ocaña, he refused to go to the ceremony at the end of the stage, and refused wear the yellow jersey the next stage. Merckx considered to leave the race because he did not want to win because of Ocaña's bad luck. Tour directors Levitin and Goddard convinced him to continue the race. The 15th stage was the shortest mass start stage in the history in the Tour, at only 19.6 kilometers. The decision was expected to fall in the first part of the 16th stage, when 4 mountains were scheduled. The Van Impe, in second place, was expected to challenge the leader Merckx, and third-placed Melck could profit from the struggle. But although Van Impe tried to attack, Merckx was able to stay with him, and the 3 cyclists stayed together. In the 17th stage, Merckx surprised Van Impe and Melck with attack, won the stage and increased his margin with more than 2 minutes. By winning the stage, Merckx solidified his lead in the points classification. The time trial that closed the race was an easy win for Merckx. The battle for the second place was won by Melck. Classification leadership. There were several classifications in the 1971 Tour de France. 3 of them are awarding jerseys to the leaders. The most important was the general classification, calculated by adding each cyclist's finishing times on each stage. The cyclist with the least accumulated time was the race leader, identified by the yellow jersey. The winner of this classification is considered the winner of the Tour. Additionally, there was a points classification, where cyclists got points for finishing among the best in a stage finish, or in intermediate sprints. The cyclist with the most points lead the classification, and was identified with a green jersey. There was also a mountains classification. The organization had categorized some climbs as either first, second, third, or fourth category. Points for this classification were won by the first cyclists that reached the top of these climbs first, with more points available for the higher categorized climbs. The cyclist with the most points lead the classification, but was not identified with a jersey in 1971. Another classification was the combination classification. This classification was calculated as a combination of the other classifications. Its leader wore the white jersey. The fifth individual classification was the intermediate sprints classification. This classification had similar rules as the points classification, but only points were awarded on intermediate sprints. In 1971, this classification had no associated jersey. For the team classification, the times of the best 3 cyclists per team on each stage were added. The leading team was the team with the lowest total time. The riders in the team that lead this classification wore yellow caps. The combativity award was given to Luis Ocaña. The new rider classification was won by Eddy Merckx. Final standings: General classification, intermediate sprints classification, doping cases. In total, 100 doping tests were done during the 1971 Tour de France, from which 2 returned positive. Yves Rivelu, after the 13th stage. Jean-Claude Dornat, after the 18th stage. Both received the customary punishment, a fine of 1,200 francs, being set back to the last place in the stage's results and getting 10 minutes penalty time in the general classification. Aftermath: this Tour de France was considered the most exciting in recent years. Ocaña fully recovered from his injuries, and would win the 1973 Tour de France.